Hopefully, you all are seeing PD the Petrel's award letter, which PD the Petrel is my favorite sample student, but PD the Petrel is a sample student. Like I said, each one of you should have your own award letters. And if you don't have your own award letters, you should have one very shortly. It's maybe we received some information recently, maybe you were admitted recently, but the vast majority, I think, of people who are attending right now should have their own award letter. Award letters they're very personalized, right? So everything on here is coming from something on a student's record, whether that comes from the student's FAFSA, whether that comes from the information that the student turned in to support their application for admission, their state of residence, all of the award letter essentially is constructed out of all of those things. I'm going to go ahead and start by just highlighting some what I hope are obvious, but sometimes kind of lost in plain sight things on the award letter, and that is the big numbers that are on here. So the aim in putting together an award letter for everybody is to identify all the scholarships and grants a student is eligible for, potentially Stafford loans that a student is eligible for, which I'll dig into a bit later. And for all of that to come together to produce kind of an annual total, this number that is here at the top of the financial aid section in P to the Petrel's case, $44,656. That is the total amount of financial aid that has been amassed that's on your award letter. And that is meant to help support the costs of your education at Oglethorpe for an academic year. An academic year is basically the fall and spring semester. So when you see reference to the 2025-2026 academic year, we're talking basically about the fall of 2025 and the spring of 2026. That, by and large, constitutes an academic year. So we're talking about what everybody probably feels and believes as a standard academic year. Let's call it August through December for the fall, January through spring. But this big number here is meant to be the total of aid that a student has amassed to help support essentially your first year in college. The next big number here is an estimated cost figure. I want to linger a little bit on the word estimated. So this number is meant to try to give you all a good idea of how much an Oglethorpe education would cost over the course of an academic year. In this case, this figure is the combination of tuition for a full-time schedule, fees for a full-time schedule, and then food and housing for a full year at Oglethorpe. In this case, it's based on Trayer Hall. So I'll pause there just a little bit. I'll explain Trayer Hall. Trayer Hall, for those of you who have been on campus, is one of our residence halls, but it's not the only residence hall. Trayer Hall is a building where most of our first year students live. And so what we've got on this aid offer letter, on this award letter, is the cost associated with living in Trayer Hall for a year. A student can live in one of many different residence halls on campus. We're giving you Trayer Hall as an example. One other thing about the estimated costs here. So the whole point and purpose of us getting this letter into your hands is to help you get an idea of an Oglethorpe education, how much it costs. A student's actual bill will depend upon the classes that a student takes and the residence hall assignment the student has. This itself is not a bill. This is here to help you guys estimate, make decisions. There are residence halls that cost more than Trayer Hall. There are residence halls that cost less than Trayer Hall. There are, if a student is coming from home and home is within 25 miles of campus, then a student can elect to commute and they wouldn't be charged room and board. There's a variety of ways to come at this. The tuition is the flat rate of tuition that's based on a full-time schedule. But if a student takes courses that have science labs or art labs or any sort of lab fee associated, then those lab fees might change the fees or the tuition just a little bit, not a lot. A lab fee is usually about $100 per lab. But I guess my point is this is not an actual bill. This is meant to help you guys estimate. And so if you're looking at this and you're thinking, I like Trayer Hall, but I like Job Hansen more, or it's great that there is food and housing on here, but I live right down the road and I plan to commute to attend Oglethorpe. That's fine. You can make those decisions. You can seek out those placements. You can shift and change. This letter is here to help you estimate and make decisions. It's not the actual bill. Since I'm on that subject, I just want to give you guys an idea. A student's actual bill starts to come together at the beginning of the summer, let's say early June. And the things that cause a student's actual bill to get generated is registration. Registration is first and foremost. Registration generates tuition. When a student registers for their class and they work with their academic advisors, which you all will be doing later on in a few months, but as that schedule gets built, that's what generates tuition. When a student is placed into an actual dorm room, when they receive their, hey, congratulations, you're coming to Oglethorpe, you're living in Trayer Hall room 212. That housing assignment is going to create the actual bill. So again, these are here as estimates to help you guys plan. All right. So with these big numbers in mind, the very bottom is there to help you just subtract one from the other, right? So if an estimate of costs for tuition fees, food and housing is $65,730. PD the Petrels secured $44,656. So the estimated annual balance left for PD the Petrel to pay is this $21,074. All of your award letters should look like this. They're all constructed this way. They're all kind of provide information in this flow and in this manner. So if you want to know just very quickly how all of this comes together, this annual balance figure is there to help you just cut right through it and have a decent understanding of, okay, I know what my grants and scholarships are. I know where I've gotten my financial aid, what's left to take care of. The amount that's left to take care of is the annual balance down here at the bottom right. I know that probably a lot of that is pretty obvious, but at the same time, I think that's a good place to start. Now, I'll take a little bit of time here to talk through, kind of some of the individual awards. I know that it's probably a pretty wide distribution of places and FAFSA results and all kinds of things that people in this session are representing. So I'll try to cover as many different scenarios and awards as possible. PD the Petrel. So I'll tell you a little bit about PD the Petrel. PD the Petrel is a resident of the state of Georgia. PD the Petrel filed the FAFSA. PD the Petrel was admitted and received a merit scholarship. And so we'll kind of walk through. But again, I'll take a step back and try to view this through as many lenses as I can. So I'm going to use PD the Petrel just straight up and talk through these awards. So the first thing on PD the Petrel's award letter here is a Pell Grant. Now, the Pell Grant is an award that comes from the FAFSA. That's the only place that a Pell Grant can come from. The application essentially for a Pell Grant is the FAFSA. Now, what happens when you file a FAFSA is the information that you provide. The information you provide is it kind of churns through the federal processor and produces a number called the Student Aid Index. And the Student Aid Index helps colleges and universities figure out what a student is eligible for in terms of need-based aid. The Pell Grant is first and foremost, it's kind of the primary grant provided by the Department of Education to help address financial need. And because of that, the FAFSA is the application for the Pell Grant, and it is the results of the Pell Grant. Sorry, I'm going to pause real quick. Just a reminder, y'all, to put yourselves on mute so we don't hear your conversations in the background. You're welcome to give us more, but I don't think that that's what some of y'all want. Um, Pell Grant coming right from the FAFSA. If you don't see a Pell Grant on your award letter and you filed a FAFSA, that's okay. Not everybody who files a FAFSA is going to be eligible for a Pell Grant. I would say there are probably actually more people who file the FAFSA who are not eligible for a Pell Grant than are. But if you see a Pell Grant on your award letter, it came from your FAFSA A. It's also a very clear indication that we received your FAFSA. And that award is coming from the Department of Education as a form of need-based aid. What everybody should have on their award letter, not everybody's going to have the Pell Grant, but what everybody should have is some level of merit scholarship. In Petey the Petrel's case, that's a Lanier scholarship. There are multiple levels of merit scholarships offered by Oglethorpe University. They essentially tie back to a student's transcript, a student's strength of their curriculum. Everything that goes into a student's application essentially churns into the offering of a merit scholarship. So that might be a Lanier scholarship, it might be an Oxford scholarship, it might be a presidential scholarship. For those of you who were able to attend, who were invited to and were able to attend Scholarship Weekend, what you did during Scholarship Weekend may have also, well, did also go into the assignment of your merit scholarship. And essentially, each student who is admitted to Oglethorpe in the traditional undergraduate program is offered one merit scholarship that essentially takes all of these things into consideration. When I say all of these things, though, I am talking purely about academics. So a merit scholarship's got nothing to do with where a student lives, what their level of financial need is, what their citizenship status is. It's purely, a merit scholarship is all about your academics. In Petey the Petrel's case, Petey was offered a Lanier scholarship, which provides $24,000 a year. And that award is meant to renew. I know what we've got here in front of you, what we've provided to you all is an award letter for the 2025-2026 academic year. Everything that's on your award letter is meant to be renewable. I'll go through the ways that different awards are renewed, but everything is meant to be there to help out for each year. So Petey's got a Lanier scholarship, which is meant to contribute $24,000 a year, or maybe more accurately, $12,000 per semester. It's one other thing that I actually blew right by when I was talking about and introducing the award letter is we've got the annual totals of your awards on the far right, but giving you an idea that the annual totals of the awards, they basically provide half of that annual total goes to the fall, half of it goes to the spring. So if you're comparing your award letter and you see a different merit scholarship, it's again, all ties back to your academic record. And if you were invited to and participated in Scholarship Weekend, what went on at Scholarship Weekend. I'm going to move on to the Hope Scholarship. The Hope Scholarship specifically is for Georgia residents. I'm going to spend a little time talking about awards from the state of Georgia, but move on from that as somewhat quickly to talk about broader things, because I know not everybody here is from the state of Georgia, and certainly not everybody who sees the recording will be either. But for those of you who are residents of the state of Georgia and are also U.S. citizens or permanent residents, basically any student who's graduating from a Georgia high school is going and as a U.S. citizen or permanent resident is going to be considered for a scholarship from the state of Georgia. That scholarship, again, ties directly back to the students, the core courses on the student's transcript. So when we're looking at Hope and Zell Miller, the eligibility criteria is all about core courses. It's not, electives have no place in the calculation of Hope versus Zell. Now, I say Hope versus Zell because a student can receive one of those awards, but not both. So if a student finishes high school with a 3.0 or above in their core subjects, they're eligible for Hope. If a student finishes high school with a 3.7 or above in their core subjects, and a qualifying test score, which is either a 1200 on the SAT or a 25 on the ACT. Then they graduate into Zell Miller, which Zell Miller, for those academic requirements, for that academic boost that I just mentioned, Zell Miller contributes a little more than Hope. So you'll see here the Hope Scholarship for PD is contributing $4,992 for the year. The Zell Miller Scholarship would contribute $4,970 for the year. So it's a slight change. Now I do want to linger on this a little bit because I think this is a very, very much understood misconception when it comes to Hope and Zell. So a lot of the information that is distributed through the news, through counseling centers, through flyers, through word of mouth, is about how Hope and Zell contribute to the tuition at public schools in the state of Georgia. When it comes to Hope and Zell at public schools in the state of Georgia, Hope and Zell each essentially contribute a certain percentage of tuition at a public school. At a private school, Hope and Zell contribute flat dollar amounts to students' accounts. And that flat dollar amount is the same no matter which private school a student attends. So what you're seeing on the screen for the Hope Scholarship contribution, that's the same contribution a student would receive to go to Oglethorpe, Emory, Agnes Scott, Spelman, Clark Atlanta, LaGrange, Piedmont, any private school in the state of Georgia. A student who's a Hope Scholar attending any private school this year has received $4,992 from the state. For the Zell Miller Scholarship, $5,970. So you don't necessarily, if that's on your award letter, then essentially we've gotten what we need to try to make that determination. If you want to talk further about, your individual student's eligibility for Hope or Zell, we're happy to answer questions. I tell you what, though, you all have that capability in your hands. If a student logs into gafutures.org, all of the information needed to make a Hope or Zell Miller Scholarship calculation funnels to gafutures.org. And if a student logs in at gafutures.org, they can see what their Hope GPA is, what their state scholarship GPA is, and what award they have been they're currently eligible for. There is the Georgia Tuition Equalization Grant here on PD's award letter, which is very simply a grant from the state of Georgia that goes to students attending private schools. So this one's kind of only for the private schools, which is nice. If a student's receiving either Hope or Zell, then they are also awarded OU Hope Plus, which is it's an Oglethorpe scholarship. It's an award provided by Oglethorpe to students who are either receiving Hope or Zell Miller. I'll jump off the state scholarship train here, but if you have any questions about Hope or Zell Miller, please put them in the chat, and we'll circle back around to them when my throat's given out and I've I've gone through the entire award letter. I'll jump over to our neighbors here in the Southeast, specifically students who are looking at Oglethorpe and they're living in the state of Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, or Texas. We understand that students coming from those states certainly may have something similar to the Hope Scholarship that would help to provide a contribution to your education if you were to stay in state. I wish I could tell you that those funds would come from your state to help contribute to your Oglethorpe education, but that's not going to be the case. So Oglethorpe has an award that we what I'll call our Hope Awards. So if you're tuning in from the state of Florida, the Hope equivalent is Bright Futures. If a student is coming from the state of Florida and they have a 3.0 or above, then they would receive our Bright Futures from Oglethorpe. It's not coming from the state of Florida. It's not necessarily the specific strict dollar amount the state of Florida is providing to students who stay in Florida, but it's a recognition by Oglethorpe that have that award, and we want to try to compensate for the fact that that award's being left behind. So any students coming from any of the states that I mentioned, which again are Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, or Texas. Students coming from one of those states and they have a 3.0 or above, then they should see one of the OU Hope Awards on their award letter to help introduce another merit award. All right, I'll keep going down the listing here. So PD the Petrel filed a FAFSA, which helps with a lot of things. If you've been to one of my sessions before, I apologize. I'm about to say something I've said. I'm probably going to say a lot of things I've said before. But if you've done a FAFSA, you have also, at least for the state of Georgia, you have applied for state aid. Every student who is receiving something from the state of Georgia has to fill out an application to secure their aid from the state of Georgia. The FAFSA is recognized by the state of Georgia as a relevant application for state aid. I can't say the same for every state that I've mentioned, but I would be willing to bet that there are several other states where the FAFSA doubles as your state aid application. The FAFSA helps us understand the level of financial need that you and your family have to help us understand what need-based awards we can introduce. The FAFSA helps us confirm your state of resident. The FAFSA helps us do a lot of things. And because the FAFSA helps us in putting all this together, we want to make it valuable to you all. So if a student has filed a FAFSA, then you should have, or if a student's filed a FAFSA or one of our internal financial aid applications for our students who cannot file a FAFSA, we will introduce an aid application grant. So that's what you're looking at here on PD's award letter. That is essentially the product of filing an aid application. Okay. So I am going to move on to the last three items here on PD the Petrel's award letter, which are federal work study and Stafford loans. So I'm going to spend just a little time talking about federal work study. So emphasis on the word federal. The federal work study program essentially, again, comes from the results of a completed FAFSA. For a student to be considered for federal work study, they have to complete a FAFSA, and they also have to have remaining financial need after everything else that I've talked about. So once you add up scholarships and grants and subtract out the results of the FAFSA from the cost of the school, does the student have financial need remaining? And I'm not talking about a balance. Financial need is not this figure here. Financial need takes into account the results of your FAFSA. Takes into account the student aid index. So cost or remaining balance and need are two different things. If a student has financial need as determined by their FAFSA, then federal work study is something that we can look at. Now, federal work study behaves differently from everything else that's on this award letter, and I'll explain why. Everything else that's on this award letter is meant to contribute in full to a student's balance in the dollar amounts that you see on here when a student enrolls and begins a semester. So PD the Petrel is going to get that $1,000 from Pell, the $12,000, everything that's in that column for the fall of 2025. PD the Petrel for grants and scholarships, PD the Petrel is going to see that hit his account when the fall semester starts. Even loans, if PD the Petrel uses the Stafford loans or secures other forms of education loans, scholarships, grants, and loans are all going to hit the account and make that contribution. Federal work study is going to work a little bit differently, at least at Oglethorpe. And there might be some variance in what I'm saying across different schools. But with federal work study is an opportunity and a pathway for a student to work on campus. They don't have to use federal work study. If they do use federal work study, then they essentially are interviewing with a potential employer on campus. When I say potential employer, I'm talking maybe it's the athletics department, maybe it's the bookstore, maybe it's the library, maybe it's the coffee shop, maybe they're giving tours. A variety, a lot of the offices on campus employ student workers, and a lot of those student workers are federal work study recipients. So in this case, a student would interview for a position on campus. If they're hired, they would work out their schedule with their supervising office on campus. They would work their hours and they would get paid according to their hourly wage. It's essentially like any other hourly job. It's happening on campus. Now, the reason I'm singling this out on the award letter is the wages don't go to the student's account. The wages go directly to the student. And what the student does with those funds is essentially up to the student. And I'll say the student and the family. So if it makes sense in your family's plan for a student to use their earnings to make payments towards their account, that's fine. But the wages and the wages earned from federal work study are first going to go to the student. And then if the student wants to use those wages to make payments on their account, they can. I laid all of that out talking about federal work study, but I also want to emphasize that federal work study having a federal work study award essentially means that a student has a pretty well-worn pathway to on-campus employment if they want it. Just about every job on campus can be filled by federal work study students. There are, however, many, many jobs on Oglethorpe's campus that are meant to be filled by a student worker, and whether or not they receive federal work study is not a condition of filling that job. So I guess really what I'm saying, if I scan back here, is if a student's got a federal work study award on their award letter, they have a really good pathway to on-campus employment. If a student really wants to work on campus and they don't have federal work study, there are still plenty of opportunities for them to work on campus. So jobs aren't only filled by federal work study students. Having a federal work study award just makes getting a job a little bit easier. If you don't have federal work study on your award letter and it's something you would like to inquire about, you are welcome to reach out. Federal work study is kind of awarded on a first come, first served basis. And so, the sooner we know of a student's interest, the easier it is to assign it. Again, come back to the fact that not every student's eligible for federal work study. There's a FAFSA need-based component to it, which kind of has me shifting gears to PD the Petrels Award letter. If you want a shorthand way of knowing whether or not you're a student, or if you are the student and you're attending, if you want a shorthand way of knowing if you're eligible for work study, take a look at the Stafford loan. If there is a subsidized version of a Stafford loan on your award letter, are pretty decent that you're eligible for work study. If the Stafford loan you see on your award letter is unsubsidized, then there's a good chance you're not eligible for federal work study. Again, you can work on campus if you're not eligible for federal work study, but helping you kind of diagnose things here. If you see a subsidized Stafford loan on the award letter and you're interested in federal work study, let us know. All right, Stafford loans. So why are the Stafford loans on here? The Stafford loans are on here because essentially the application for a Stafford loan is the FAFSA. We're not saying that a student has to take out a Stafford loan, but by filing and receiving the FAFSA, we know that you are eligible for a Stafford loan. You have secured a specific dollar amount in guaranteed loans if you want to use them. The FAFSA is, like I said, the FAFSA tells us many things about a student's eligibility for aid, and that is one of them. Now, there's a specific dollar amount that is on your award letter for the Stafford loans, and I want to spend just a little while talking about that. So there are student loans that are flexible, meaning if you need $7,156 in a loan, there are loans that you can request for $7,156. My point being, there are loans you can request for specific dollar amounts. The Stafford loans, the amount that a student is eligible for kind of ties back to where the student is in their undergraduate education. So if a student files a FAFSA and they're found eligible for federal aid, and the student is in their first year of college, most likely the most the student can borrow in a Stafford loan is $5,500. That's regulated by the Department of Education. Again, the application very simply is the FAFSA. The guarantee is $5,500, but it's not open-ended because it's to request it. So if you see $5,500 on your award letter in a Stafford loan, that's the amount that the Department of Education was willing to guarantee you from that program for your first year. Again, you do not have to use these. They're on here as a reference point. They're on here to let you know that that money is guaranteed to you if you want to use it. And they're on here, again, because you filed a FAFSA and it confirmed you're eligible. I want to take a real quick step back because one of the things that I talk with students and families about is, Chris, we filed the FAFSA. We're not sure if we're eligible for financial aid. A loan is technically a form of financial aid. So if if I guess I'll just use Bill Gates. If Bill Gates applies for a FAFSA, Bill Gates' student is probably going to be eligible for Stafford loans. So again, the FAFSA is an application for that program. Whether or not you want to use it is up to you all. Now, I do want to highlight something here. The Stafford loans, when we kind of amass this total for you all, the Stafford loans are included here. So if you do not intend to use the Stafford loans, that's fine. You would just want to add them back on top of this annual balance. That's just kind of the way it comes together. So just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. Now, on PD the Petrel's award letter, I mentioned a little bit ago about having a subsidized Stafford loan. You'll notice the PD's got two different types of Stafford loans on here. There is absolutely a difference between those two, but they are more similar than they are different. So I'm going to explain the difference between a subsidized and an unsubsidized Stafford loan. But first, I'm going to say that they're the same in almost every way. The interest rate associated with the subsidized and unsubsidized is the same. The repayment terms is the same. The forgiveness plans and repayment plans are the same. Everything, the application for them is the same. The source of funding is the same. The Stafford loans, the subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loan are essentially the same, minus one very key difference, which is when interest starts to build on the loan. With the subsidized version, the interest begins building after a student finishes college and starts repaying the loans. So essentially, if PD the Petrel were to borrow this $3,500 in the subsidized Stafford loan, when PD the Petrel walks across the stage at commencement in, what would that be, 2029, PD the Petrel will still owe $3,500 on that loan. With the unsubsidized Stafford loan, the interest begins accumulating as soon as the funds are sent to the school. So if PD the Petrel borrows this $1,000 for his first term, the interest is going to start building on that $1,000 once it's sent to the school at the beginning of the fall. The interest will begin building on this $1,000 once the funds are sent to the school in the beginning of the spring, which would be January. So even though PD the Petrel is not responsible for starting to repay these loans until graduation or 6 months after graduation, the interest is building on the unsubsidized Stafford. The interest is not building on the subsidized. Now, this is where I wish I could say that everybody can just request a subsidized Stafford loan. But again, or what makes a student eligible for subsidized and unsubsidized, it comes back to the results of the FAFSA, comes back to unmet financial need, which I was trying to define a little bit earlier in this presentation. So if a student has unmet financial need as determined by the FAFSA, again, not talking about your net balance, talking about financial need determined by your FAFSA. If a student has unmet financial need, then the subsidized Stafford loan can be offered. Now, the most a first-year student can receive in the subsidized Stafford loan, though, is $3,500. The most a freshman can receive in total Stafford dollars is $5,500. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I kind of I feel like I'm blazing through a lot of this, y'all. So hopefully you've got some good questions and we can stop and focus on some more things that some more specifics that maybe I missed. But I do want to mention um, one other thing about the Stafford loans, and I blew right by this. So the Stafford, the timing on repayment for loans is 6 months. I said after graduation, but that's technically not the way it is. It's how it is for a lot of students. But repayment of student loans begins 6 months after a student is no longer enrolled towards a degree. So I'll give you a couple examples to highlight that. If PD the Petrel borrows these loans, finishes undergrad, goes into the workforce, 6 months after graduation, PD the Petrel would start repaying the Stafford loans or any loans that PD decides to seek out. If PD the Petrel finishes undergrad and goes right from undergrad into a graduate program the next school year, PD the Petrel hasn't taken a break of 6 months. And so PD the Petrel won't start repaying his loans until he's been out of school for 6 months. And what if a student takes a break and goes back? What if PD the Petrel finishes undergrad, takes a gap year, works for a while, and then a year later comes back and begins a graduate program? Once a student re-enters a degree-seeking program, their loans go back on pause. So if PD takes a gap year, PD would start repaying the loans 6 months after finishing undergrad. But then once PD enrolls in a grad program, those loan repayments go on pause. So it's 6 months of a break, essentially, from a degree-seeking program that starts repayment on loans. I can go into a little bit. You know what? How about this? I'm gonna finish up with the award letter here. I said a little bit about these charges. I'm just going to revisit them to just give you guys peel a little bit more of this curtain back for the tuition. So the tuition on here that we've got is for a full-time schedule. A full-time schedule is any schedule where a student is attempting between 12 and 19 credit hours. That is essentially a full-time schedule. Now, the way that tuition is charged at Oglethorpe, this is different school to school, but the way that tuition is charged at Oglethorpe, tuition is the flat rate, the flat dollar amount that you see on the screen, the flat dollar amount that's on your award letter for any schedule between 12 and 19 credit hours. So if PD the Petrel takes 12 hours in fall of 25, this is the tuition, $24,500. If PD the Petrel takes 18 credit hours in spring of 26, $24,500. So the tuition that's charged is not changing if PD's schedule is somewhere between 12 and 19 credit hours. Now, if a student is in a situation where, for a variety of reasons, they cannot attempt a full-time schedule, that's fine, but we should talk about that as we should have an individual conversation about that, because this whole award letter that we're presenting to you, this example I've got on the screen and the example or the specific one you've got in your Petrel portals, is all based on the assumption that a student's going to be a full-time student. If a student's not going to take full-time classes, the tuition is going to change. The tuition would go down. But guess what? Every single one of these awards is also based on the assumption that a student's going to be full-time, and they're all impacted slightly in a slightly different way based on how many hours a student is attempting. So if a student needs to attempt less than a full-time schedule, that's fine. Let's talk about it. But let's let's talk about what that's going to do to everything that's on this page, because it will have an impact. But again, 12 to 19 credit hours, that's what this rate of tuition is covering. If a student goes over 19 credit hours and they start to get into overload tuition, but I think that everybody on this call is looking to transition in for their first year at Oglethorpe, and I don't think first-year students can overload. So, but if you're ambitious and you've got an overload in your future, let's talk about that as well, because that'll change tuition just a little bit. The fees that we got on here, this is essentially citing a student activity fee, which is it's actually a fee that all full-time students pay, and it ends up being This fee goes to the Student Government Association to help put on a variety of different student activities that are for the entire campus. So if you if you want to change the student activity fee, or excuse me, the student experience fee, then get involved in student government, because that's kind of where it happens. I mentioned earlier, food and housing is based on the rate for Trayer Hall. I just want to emphasize this is food and housing. So there's not a separate meal plan charge. What we've given you on the award letter is what it costs to live in a dorm room for a semester in this case, with the utilities and all the provisions that come with living in a dorm room. The rate that's on here also includes an all-access meal plan for a semester, which I believe all access means if the cafeteria is open, then a student can can come and partake in it. So that's a little bit about the fees. A couple other things that are not on here that I want to highlight for you guys. One is, one of the things that we have looked at in putting together award letters is, what has the student communicated about their plans to live on campus? So if a student has, really what I'll just say, if a student has outright said that they do not plan to live on campus, then that communication may be reflected in the award letter. There are awards like Flagship 50. I didn't talk about Flagship 50, but we could spend a whole nother hour on that. If a student's eligible for Flagship 50, which takes either a 3.8 GPA, a 1400 on the SAT, or a 30 on the ACT, one of the other components is living on campus. And so if a student has said that they are not planning to live on campus, that may impact their eligibility for that kind of an award. Oglethorpe also, as much as we can, we try to look into other forms of aid that are tied to living on campus. Again, if a student has communicated they're not planning to live on campus, then those awards may not have been considered. I tell you what, y'all, I've got some more things to say, but I also want to get into your questions, and I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see, kind of the entirety of everybody, the entirety of this room. I tell you what, let's get into questions, because I got some other things that I can say, but I've spent enough time talking about what I had planned. Let's talk about what y'all have planned.
The 21,000 that's like leftover, that's responsible for the family to pay. Can they take out a loan and whatnot?
It's funny, because if you guys didn't have questions, that was going to be one of the next things that I talked about. So let's talk a little bit about that remaining balance. So the remaining balance that you see on the award letter, the one that you cited, thank you, Vilma, that is the annual balance for fall and spring combined. A student is only ever going to receive a bill one semester at a time. So the fall semester is half of the annual balance you see on the award letter. Now, we have families who will elect to pay that in one lump sum. That's always an option. Families who want to do that for the fall, typically the fall is due like in mid-August, and the spring semester is due around the beginning of January. Families also have the option to set up a payment plan. So our business office makes semesterly payment plans available to where a family can spread the semester balance into 4, 5, or 6 equal monthly installments. So that's an option. The payment plans are meant to start near the beginning of the term and end as the term is ending. So the fall semester, you would spread the fall semester balance into installments and finish paying it by the end of the fall semester. But installment plans are available. And then you mentioned it in your question. There are loans that are credit-based loans that there are credit-based loans for parents. There are credit-based loans for students. And if a parent is approved for what's called a Parent Plus loan, that can be used to cover the remaining balance, and the Parent Plus loan can be repaid either 6 months after graduation or immediately. It's the parent's choice. There are credit-based loans for students. Most undergraduate students just haven't had the chance to build enough of a credit history to be approved for a credit-based loan on their own. So usually a student needs the help of a co-signer to get a credit-based loan. But yeah, there are loans through like Sallie Mae or SoFi or Citizens Bank, or there are dozens of lenders across the country where a student, most likely with the help of a co-signer, can get a credit-based loan to pay the difference. Those options are not like mutually exclusive, so you can combine them. If you want to take out a loan for a little bit, pay a little bit, do a payment plan for a little bit, those kinds of things can be done. But all those options are out there. Let's see. I see a whole bunch of questions, so I'm probably not going to be able to get to all these, but I'll try to get to as many as we can. What do you think is next, Isabel?
I have one where I'm not quite sure, and I need to reread the letter. What GPA is required to keep the presidential scholarship? I think it's like a 3.2, but I can't be sure.
So
I know it's higher than 3.0.
It's actually, I'm glad you said that, because we have an older version of the presidential scholarship where the requirement was a 3.2. Students who received a presidential scholarship this year, it's not that version. So essentially, the requirements to keep a lot of the awards you see on your award letter is what's called satisfactory academic progress. And I guarantee that everybody in here has higher academic ambitions than satisfactory academic progress. It's a little more nuanced than this, but satisfactory academic progress is essentially a 2.0 GPA and completing 2/3 of the courses that you attempt with a passing grade. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about the ones that require more than satisfactory academic progress. If you were awarded a full tuition scholarship, whether that's a JEO, a theater, an EAGLE scholarship, or a HAMMOck scholarship, those all require a 3.2 GPA to keep those. If you have been awarded any version of the any version of one of Oglethorpe's out-of-state Hope Awards, whether that's Hope Bright, OU Bright Futures, or Our North Carolina Hope, or any of the ones that I kind of mentioned, those all require a 3.0. The Hope Scholarship from the state of Georgia requires a 3.0. The Zell Miller Scholarship requires a 3.3. Now, just about everything else requires satisfactory academic progress, including flagship 50. So if a student has an award letter where they've got a presidential scholarship, a Hope Scholarship, and a flagship 50 scholarship, the presidential and the flagship 50 require satisfactory academic progress. The Hope Scholarship requires a 3.0. I think another important thing to remember is we only got 7 minutes, or I don't want to spend too much time on the nuances of the state of Georgia and how Hope and Zell are evaluated. But by and large, if you start college in the fall, the first evaluation period for all these GPAs that I just talked about is the end of your first year. It's May. It's 2 semesters after you begin. By and large, if you start in the spring and you're from the state of Georgia, it might just be your first term. But if you start in the fall, the first evaluation period for aid from the state of Georgia, aid from Oglethorpe, all of these things is going to be the end of your first year, the end of your first 2 academic terms. And it's going to be the cumulative work you do over that year. So it's not going to be your last term. It'll be, what did you do over the fall and spring combined?
What happens if the parent credit is not available for the student? What other help is there available? I think that's a case by case. We'd have to see what exactly is the situation and how we can best help the student.
And if you don't mind, Isabel, I can add a little bit to that. So one of the unique things, I'm gonna isolate the Parent Plus loan just a little bit here. So the Parent Plus loan it's a loan for parents. A student cannot take out a plus loan. A Parent Plus loan, only a parent, biological or adoptive or step parent, I believe, can take out a Parent Plus loan. It's a credit-based loan. The parent applies for it. Now, the reason I'm singling this out is if a parent is approved for the PLUS loan, then the parent can use that to cover whatever they would like. Well, within cost of attendance. If a parent is not approved, if a parent applies for the Parent Plus loan and they're not approved for it, the student's eligibility for Stafford loans goes up. It's not like an infinite amount. It's not but it does go up by $4,000 a year. So the Parent Plus loan is one way to it's an application that's going to produce some sort of additional resource for the student. It's just, is it going to be $4,000 extra in Stafford, or is it going to be the PLUS loan that can be used up to cost of attendance? Beyond that, there are, well, yeah, we'll kind of leave it at that for the moment, but hopefully that's helpful.
Just to confirm, so to apply for the Parent Plus loan, the student has to complete the FAFSA, be eligible for it, and then get the parents to, I guess, like do it through their portal.
Yes. So you nailed it in the sense, Isabel, that the first thing that has to exist is the student has to have a FAFSA filed. That's number one. Once a student's FAFSA is on file, if a parent wants to apply for the PLUS loan, there's a separate application, but it's also at studentaid.gov. It's the same website where you went to file the FAFSA. There's a separate application for the Parent Plus loan. Now, I don't think, it could be different this year, but in years past, the PLUS loan application hasn't opened until mid-April at the earliest. So if you went out there right now and you tried to apply for a PLUS loan for 2025, 2026, which is going to be your freshman years, you won't find it. Right now, the only PLUS loan that you can apply for is for 24, 25, which is students who are enrolled today, right now. So if you go out there, you find the application for the PLUS loan, but it probably won't be available for 2025, 2026 for a few weeks. But that's where you'll find it, studentaid.gov. Other real quick important thing about the PLUS loan, if a parent's going to studentaid.gov to apply for a PLUS loan, the parent who intends to borrow has to be the person who logs into studentaid.gov. If the student logs in, studentaid.gov assumes that the student is applying for the loan, and a student can't apply for a Parent Plus loan. So, yeah.
Any last minute questions, folks? We have 2 minutes. I think I've tried to answer every single question. Again, I will put in the chat my email and Chris's email, just so that you may contact us. Again, look at your Peter portals. Definitely read through that. And then we will, oh, you're welcome. You're so welcome, everybody. We are here for you. So yes, definitely let us know if we can help you out anymore with answering your questions. Again, if we're not available, definitely contact your admissions counselor. They are definitely helpful as well. So yeah, just let us know. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night. Please, like Isabel said, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We want to help you.